Good day, Potterheads. Thanks for visiting the page. Here we are with a new chapter of Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. Here we are with Chapter 43, The Holy Grail.
Chapter 43, Sacrifice. Chapter text. Awareness came back to Harry slowly. As soon as he stepped out of the room, he felt stunned and disoriented, as if he had just drunk an entire bottle of wine by himself. As they had promised, they had given Merlin a head start, and when Harry and Ginny exited the Department of Mysteries, he began to feel indignant. How could I just let him leave? He asked himself, appalled. Ginny appeared as flabbergasted and bewildered as he felt. So stunned was he that he opened his mouth several times to speak before remembering that he was at the Ministry of Magic in the dead of night, and it would probably be for the best if he did not speak. The Horcrux was heavy in his palm, and because he couldn't talk out loud, he argued fiercely with himself. How could I just trust him like that? You didn't have much of a choice. And he didn't hurt you, did he? But he could have. He didn't. He also didn't tell me anything. Maybe he had his reasons. He stole the cloak. An ephemeral thought flitted through his mind so quickly that he nearly grasped something important, but then it was lost again. I hate it when that happens, Harry thought sullenly. He poked and prodded his emotions and realized that he was only annoyed because his curiosity had not been satisfied. He trusted Merlin. Sort of. I don't think he's a Death Eater or anything. You're a moron. He got the Horcrux. Fine, Harry thought sulkily, but I wish I knew who he is. His internal argument kept him company back to the point from which they could apparate back to Godric's Hollow. Ginny grasped his hand tightly, spun on the spot, and they vanished together with a loud crack. Harry opened his eyes a moment after to find Ron and Hermione sitting very close to one another on an armchair. The other two looked up, and Harry saw that they were afraid to hear the news. It seems like so long ago, that kind of despair, he thought, filled with wonder. But the rune had washed the despair away like a cleansing rain, leaving behind a sense of purpose and love. It was like the best parts of Harry had been illuminated, and the knowledge that he could do this with his head held high was priceless beyond measure. Did you? No. Ginny's voice was strong. Hermione abruptly stood up and walked out of the room without speaking another word. Harry watched her go. He knew the words that would comfort her, but he did not think that he ought to be the one to tell her. He had seen a glimpse of her face, and he knew that any words coming from him would only make her anguish worse. I'll go, Ginny said. I'll tell her what I saw, what I felt. Harry nodded. He threw himself down on the sofa and stretched out his legs. A part of him still marveled at the peace he felt. Thank you, Luna, he said fervently. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Merlin, since you probably told her to tell us to go there. So, Ron's voice cut into his thoughts. Harry blinked. There's nothing, Ron asked. His voice was raspy. He sounded like an old man. There's nothing you can do. No, Harry said gently. His vision doubled, and he remembered the scenes that had passed before his eyes. Ron had figured into a great many of him. Brave, loyal Ron who had a very large heart, even when he didn't know it. He chuckled softly. You think it's funny? Ron asked incredulously. Harry saw that his eyes were wet. Not that, no, Harry admitted. But I think that love room turned me into a girl. What? Ron said blankly. Helped me understand a lot about love, Harry said. He ruffled his hair nervously. He and Ron talked about loads of things, but they'd never been much for sharing feelings. Not to sound like Dumbledore, but when I was confronted with how many decisions I've made because of love, and not just the big stuff, but the little things, I've got to agree that it's the most powerful force in the universe. Ron's brows scrunched together, but he didn't say anything. Harry didn't say anything for a long moment. Is that why Merlin wanted me to go into that room? Will help me do what has to be done? Did I keep trying to find another solution and fall into something dark? His belly flooded with ice at the thought, but he realized now how much despair he had felt. It was like having a lamp turned on in a room in which his eyes had gotten used to near total darkness. And I might have even justified it, Harry thought guiltily, because I didn't want to leave Ginny. Oh, he was certain that he would not have made a Horcrux, but he was unable to judge now how far he would have gone to survive. It's a blessing, Harry said suddenly. Voldemort can be beaten. Don't you dare, Ron said. He glared at Harry. If you say that it's an easy solution, I'll punch you. It isn't an easy solution, Harry said. It's worth it, though, Ron. And if you were me, you'd feel exactly the same way. I don't know if I could do it, Ron said. He had his head in his hands again. I just don't know. I'm selfish. His voice was muffled, and Harry had to lean forward to hear him. I'm not like you, Harry. Can you imagine if we were exactly the same person? Harry asked dryly. Hermione wouldn't have survived our moods. Ron snorted. Harry squirmed and grimaced, feeling immensely uncomfortable. Listen, I think you could do it. You just don't have to. And I'm really grateful for that. Harry took a deep breath. He wished these types of things could just be understood, and that Harry did not have to speak these words. Hey, Ron. We've, been friends for a while. I'm not going to date you. Harry, Ron chuckled, but sounded a bit forced. He obviously sensed an emotional moment in the offing. He looked up, and when Harry met the eyes of his best mate, he felt a great bloody lump in his throat. Damn, this is just going to make it worse. I'm glad it was you, Harry said. He cleared his throat, but the lump persisted, and now tears were stinging the backs of his eyes. Great, just great. If I could have chosen any bloke to come back in time with me, I wouldn't have even had to think about it. I couldn't. If you hadn't been here, I really don't think I would have made it this far. They stood up and moved forward into a hug at exactly the same moment. Ron slapped him on the back with enough force that Harry thought he might bruise, and he squeezed tightly enough that he thought he might have heard one of Ron's ribs crack. I think maybe you were right, Ron said. I think maybe that room did turn you into a girl. They both laughed. Ron pretended not to notice that a few tears squeezed out of Harry's eyes, even though he tried his best to hold it in, and Harry did the same when Ron had to turn around and swipe at his face. Will you do me a favor? Harry asked quietly. Of course, Ron said. Harry could hear the anything tacked on, though Ron didn't say it. I've got something to do, Harry said. I want to be with Ginny, and I need to make something. He did not know what he had planned until the words were out of his mouth, but he wanted to make absolutely certain that they would be all right. He did not want Voldemort to be allowed to hurt them. My part is at the beginning, and I don't really want to plan the battle, or tell people what to do, or anything like that. Plus, I'm the master strategist, Ron said modestly. He tried to smile, but it kept slipping off his face. Of course, Harry. 3 days passed in a flurry of activity in which Harry did not take part. He stayed in Godric's Hollow with Ginny. He was doing his best to offer those he loved one last measure of protection. Ron must have warned everyone that Harry had things to do. Harry suspected that Ron had alluded to the terrible power, and no one questioned his absence in the planning. He spent the evenings with the Weasleys, Remus, Tonks, Dumbledore, and anyone else who could join them. They did not speak about the final battle, and Harry's feeling of clarity and peace did not diminish, but was strengthened. He thought that might have something to do with the runes that he had been making for those he loved. His mother had invoked ancient magic when she had sacrificed herself for Harry. Harry wanted his own sacrifice to be the same. But because he did not want to take any chances, and because he thought it might work, he asked Sirius if he could melt down the silver goblets. Sirius had given him his wholehearted approval, and he set about making talismans. It was late afternoon on the day before they were to draw Voldemort into battle. Harry could not avoid hearing some things, and Harry was nearly done with his project. He set aside the talisman that he had made for Ron, pulled a clump of silver toward him, and then stared. He thought that it would be the same for each person. Ginny, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Dumbledore, Percy, Fred, George, and all the rest. He didn't think that each would be so highly individual, and as that awareness grew, he had held off making the last 4. Ron's is done, he said gruffly. Ginny reached over and rubbed his neck with gentle hands. Which one will you make next? She asked softly. Your mum's, I think, Harry said. I'm saving yours for last. Harry had been surprised to realize that he was actually capable of very complex emotions. He'd thought that he loved everyone the same way, though he had to admit that he loved some people more than others. But he didn't. Creating the runes out of the silver forced him to plumb the depths of his own emotions. something he was not particularly comfortable with. They even looked different. Luna's, for example, looked fragile. The lines of the rune were thinner, though still strong, and appeared delicate. Dumbledore's was all exaggerated lines, and was larger than the others. They were all different. Molly Weasley, he thought. He raised his wand and began to carve. He did not even have to look at the etched rune in front of him. He knew the shape very well. He let his mind drift, as it always did when he made a talisman. He thought of her mothering, and how it had defined her for so long. I sort of forgot that she was a person, Harry thought, a bit guiltily. She was very fierce in protecting those she loved. A line of the rune took on the shape of a claw, and he couldn't help but smile. He continued on, and he realized that it was not so difficult after all, thinking about everything he loved about her. It didn't hurt. He still had the knowledge that she was his Molly Weasley. That's beautiful, Ginny breathed in his ear. You say that after every single one, Harry said. It's true, though, Ginny said stoutly. It's amazing to watch. Sometimes I can see something flash, and it's like I'm having another vision. I'm remembering what I saw, said Harry. He loved that she had not questioned what he was doing. She had not asked him if it was really necessary. She understood that he must do everything he can, and if that meant doing something that wasn't strictly necessary, it was necessary for Harry. It was easier to make Arthur's talisman than it was to make Molly's. Harry thought it might have something to do with what had happened at Azkaban, but Harry felt he knew the older wizard better, and that he had a stronger grasp on who he was. And it made him laugh when Harry's appreciation of Arthur's childlike love of Muggles translated over to a line, the same line that appeared to be a claw on Molly's, looking like the blades of an old-fashioned lawnmower. As with the others, toward the end he closed his eyes and let the memories take hold and guide his wand. He wiped the sweat off his brow and took a large gulp of water. Arthur's talisman appeared strong and clean. It looked the most like Ron's. He glanced down at the next clump of silver and wondered what he would find there. It made him vastly uncomfortable. He did not want to probe his emotions in regards to Severus Snape, but he likewise could not leave him out. He grimaced and set to work. It was every bit as draining as he expected. It did not truly surprise Harry that he loved. He grimaced just thinking about it, Snape. He'd known for a very long time that he respected both the old Snape and the new. He also admired the new Snape for his ability to overcome his bitterness. He thought of Snape's bravery in going to Voldemort again and again, keeping a secret inside his head that would get him killed in an instant. He thought of the fact that it had been Snape's love for Harry's mother that had led him to do this. He even put in his admiration of the fact that, in the last timeline, no matter how much Harry had impugned his name, Snape had kept the secret. He snorted when he saw a line that looked very like a snake. In Ron's talisman, it had been a broomstick. I still can't get over the fact that they all look so different, Harry said. He laid Ron's and Snape's side by side, and he saw two completely different objects that were, nevertheless, exactly the same. He shook his head. I'm deeper than I thought. Ginny laughed. It's almost time for dinner, she murmured in his ear. We got about half an hour. Do you have time to make mine? No, Harry said, but we have time for something else. She circled around him and sat on his lap. I was hoping you were going to say that. I think you might need a little reminder of how much you love me. Harry unbuttoned her blouse and slipped his hand inside. Never, he said, but I'm not going to say no to having it reinforced just a little. Everyone came to dinner that night. Harry suspected that Ron had issued a command, but he did not voice his suspicions. It felt too good to sit around a table full of giddy people and excellent food. He remembered these moments of camaraderie from last time. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. Well, Harry knew what it would bring for him, and everyone was a bit punch-drunk from the uncertainty. His entire body felt light. He glanced around the table, and it struck him what a miracle it was that so many of them had survived to this point. There were only two empty places, Neville and Moody. The rest were there, faces alight with a mixture of terror and elation that the time to fight, really fight, was so close. I don't want them to come back for me, Harry realized with a start. He knew that despite whatever she had seen at the Department of Mysteries, despite the fact that she knew that he had to do this, Ginny would be tempted to play with time again. Adding them into the mix with Merlin, who appear to have the opposite goal, would likely be catastrophic. But the last thing he wanted to do on the eve of his death was to start an argument with Ginny and Ron. Percy laughed at something Fred said, and Harry had an idea. If Harry told Percy to give them a message, they would listen to him. He hoped they would listen to him. If it came from anyone else, they might listen to Sirius, but Harry did not want to force his godfather to convince anyone to let James' son stay dead. I'll write him a letter, Harry thought. After Ginny is asleep. Harry and Ginny were the last to arrive at Hogwarts the next day. It was late afternoon. The sun was steadily moving toward the mountains, and night was rapidly approaching. Harry felt almost lightheaded with relief that he had not been expected to plan what would come next. Ron had done everything. Harry had only had to show up in the Great Hall. What the dash? Harry said, shocked, when he and Ginny entered. It was filled with people, most of whom Harry did not know or only recognized in passing. He saw the two women who had argued so fiercely about the frying pan, or it might have been a shoe, sitting next to each other at the table normally reserved for Slytherin. Amos and Cedric Diggory sat over at the Hufflepuff table, and several shopkeepers from Diagon Alley congregated around Fred and George. Turns out a lot of people wanted to help, Ron said. He shrugged nonchalantly, but Harry saw the pride in his eyes. Harry gave a lopsided smile. Well done, General, he said. Ron tilted his head toward Hermione, and the chain he wore, upon which hung the talisman that Harry had made him, glinted in the light. How many do you reckon? More than 100, Ron said. So we've modified our plans a little. Snape's telling Voldemort that 20 people showed up with us. We're hoping he'll bring his full force. Save us the work, later. Harry nodded. He was about to open his mouth and thank Ron when he found himself gripped tightly around the arm and dragged away. Hey, he said loudly. Percy glared at him. What the hell did you mean by that letter you shoved under my door? Harry had been hoping that he would not be confronted about this. Late the night before, after he had finished Ginny's rune and she had fallen asleep, he had agonized over what he wanted to tell Percy. He had finally simply written, "Tell Ginny and Ron not to come back for me." Just what it said, Harry said firmly. But Harry shook his head. Listen, you're going to understand soon enough. Just tell them, all right. Percy's mouth was set in a firm line, and he looked as though he would like nothing better than to beat Harry with a bludger until he told Percy what he had meant by the note. Are all the students out? Harry asked, hoping to divert his attention. Of course, he said stiffly, except for the ones of age that wished to fight. Harry looked around and saw Ernie Macmillan standing around with Dean Thomas, Daphne Greengrass, and Anthony Goldstein. He suspected that quite a few members of Potter's army had stayed behind. No stragglers? He pressed, just to be certain. No, Percy said. We checked with the Marauders map that Sirius had. They're all gone. We sent them to the safe houses where all the Muggleborns were staying. Good, Harry said. He cast about for something to say. Anything. When the sound of a very loud bell filled the room. Everyone immediately stopped talking, and everyone turned, almost as one, toward the doors that led to the entrance hall. Harry did not need anyone to tell him what that sound meant. He had apparently arrived just in time. Voldemort had arrived. A small, warm hand slipped into his. People were talking. Harry heard Snape mention something about their plan working, and Sirius responded with question. The Weasleys were issuing last-minute instructions. Potter's army was congregated near the head table. They appeared to be chanting something, though Harry's ears felt as though they'd been filled with cotton. He looked around again, and his eyes found Molly and Arthur. He regretted that he had wasted this last year on a hurt that somehow seemed quite childish now. Tell them I love them, he said. I'm pretty sure they'll figure it out, Ginny said. Her voice wobbled. Even so, Harry said. They stared at each other for a few moments. Harry opened his mouth to tell her again just how much he loved her. Voldemort's voice, magically amplified, washed over them like a cold wave. Everywhere around him, people's faces set in grim lines. Ron spat on the ground at his feet. All wands were drawn, though everyone knew not to attack until Ron gave the signal. It registered dimly on Harry that Ron's plan had worked. Voldemort had brought an army against what he thought was about 30 people. Give yourself up, Harry Potter, Voldemort said. and I will spare what few friends you have left. You have 20 minutes to come to me. If you do not, everyone in that building will die. On your head be it." Harry cleared his throat. He did not want their last memory of him to be of his voice shaking with fear. "That's my cue," he said in what he hoped was a light, casual tone. He saw face after incredulous face turn toward him. "What do you mean, Harry?" Fred asked. Others echoed him, until the hall rang with confusion. "What's that supposed to mean? What's he talking about? How does he expect? Why is he—" Harry's eyes met Dumbledore's. Dumbledore stood straight, though his face was lined with grief. He wore the talisman that Harry had made him over his robes, and it seemed to glow. "Don't worry," Harry said. He tried to sound reassuring. "I'm going to unleash my terrible power." Harry turned and found himself engulfed in a tight hug from Sirius. His godfather didn't say anything. Harry was not certain that Sirius could talk at this moment. Those who knew and loved him respected his desire not to have to say goodbye. But Ginny, Ron, Hermione, and Luna followed him out of the Great Hall, where everyone was murmuring excitedly. Harry could hear Charlie speculating about what exactly the terrible power was, and into the entrance hall. None of them said anything. It was too big for words. Harry let his eyes linger on all of them. He wondered if he would exist enough to miss them. "Harry," Ginny said softly. Harry kissed her. It was like the kisses they shared after they had lost everyone, when the only things separating Harry from complete despair had been her and Ron. He tasted salty tears and wondered if it was her crying or if it was his tears. After what felt like only a second, Harry pulled away. Luna caught Ginny and threw her arms around her, whispering in her ear. Harry turned away. The 5 steps that took him from just inside the entrance hall to right over the threshold were perhaps the hardest steps that he had ever taken. He kept his back straight. He did not look back. He did not want to see the look of fierce anticipation that must surely be written on the faces of those who did not know what he was about to do. He tapped himself with his own wand and murmured the spell that would turn him invisible until just before he met Voldemort. Voldemort was waiting. Harry wiped his sweaty hands on his robes. He paused and leaned against the wall of the castle. "I wish that he wasn't waiting for me right here, where everyone can see," he thought a little desperately. Everyone who had chosen to fight the Death Eaters and Voldemort had a very good view. The light of the setting sun spread across Hogwarts, and Voldemort and his followers stood out in stark relief. Harry took a few more steps and then paused again. He stood in the middle. Before him were his enemies. Behind him were the people he loved far more than his own life. He had never felt more alone. "I'm here." It was Merlin, and it was as though he had read Harry's thoughts. "I can do this," Harry said fiercely, defensively. "I'm not going to back out. I'm going to do this. If that's why you're here." "Of course not." Merlin sounded surprised, shocked even. "You've always been able to do this. Then why are you here?" Harry asked. He sounded a bit desperate even to his own ears, and he was aware that he was drawing out the time, trying to solve this one last mystery. "If I can do this, if I didn't need you to—" He tried to think of the right words, his mind scrambling. "Encourage events to play out the way they have. Why are you even here?" They had started walking again. Harry could feel Merlin at his side. He moved when Harry moved, and if Harry focused on their steps, he could almost forget what lay ahead. The silence stretched out for 10 steps, Harry counted, and it seemed like Merlin would withhold this information. "I didn't want you to be alone," said Merlin. Harry knew by the thickness of Merlin's voice that the other man was close to tears. Harry's eyes were strangely dry. He walked forward several more steps, and Harry found that Merlin's words had enabled him to lengthen his stride. Merlin followed pace. He squinted and imagined he could see the red of Voldemort's eyes. "Are you wearing my cloak?" Harry asked. "You didn't have to steal it, you know. The Resurrection Stone was destroyed long ago." "I didn't know," Merlin admitted after a long pause. "Now you do," Harry said. Harry felt fingers brush against his arm and then grip it tightly. "Listen," Merlin said in a low, urgent voice. "I'm so sorry. I really am. Please forgive me." Harry did not know what to make of this apology. His thoughts were a confusing swirl as fully half his mind was occupied with the large cluster of Death Eaters, Dementors, Giants, and Werewolves, and he could not devote his full attention to the strange conversation he was having. Merlin had come from the future, which must mean that he knew something that Harry could not know. "I think you care about what's going to happen in a few moments," Harry said a bit recklessly. He was much more at ease sharing his feelings. He only had a few more minutes to feel uncomfortable. After all, that makes it easier, knowing that you don't like this. So, of course, there is no need to apologize. "I care very much," Merlin said immediately. Harry nodded, forgetting that Merlin could not see him. "I thought you might." If Merlin did not care about Harry, why would he walk with him to lend him courage? He did not need to understand Merlin's motivations to know that Harry walked beside a friend. And now that it was happening, it felt almost inevitable that Merlin be here, whoever he may be. Harry and one person who loved him. Merlin could be almost anyone, yet his faceless nature made it almost as though everyone he loved stood with him. Harry took another step forward, and then another, and then several more until he was very close. He could hear the Death Eaters talking loudly, and felt the chill of the Dementors, who flanked the humans and giants and werewolves. He refused to let them affect him. He did not want his last moments to flee with him, feeling an unnatural despair. "Will you take the disillusionment charm off of me?" Harry asked in the barest of whispers. "I don't want to be tempted to use my wand." "When you're ready," Merlin breathed. Harry put his wand away and took a few more steps forward. Voldemort was perhaps 10 feet away. He was not speaking to his followers. He stared straight ahead. He seemed certain that Harry would show up. He understood that Harry would not allow his friends to die. He was right. His long, spidery fingers held his wand in a loose grip that pointed it up toward his chin. Harry's insides gave twist. Harry took another deep breath. "I'm ready." Several things happened at once. Harry flickered back into visibility, and the followers of Tom Riddle immediately began to jeer and laugh at what they thought was his stupidity. Harry heard a furtive, wheezing sound and saw Peter Pettigrew giggling. Voldemort was silent. And almost at the same moment that Merlin took the disillusionment charm off of Harry, the clearing lit up with a faint, silvery light that seemed to warm Harry's body from the inside out. What seemed like hundreds of patron users congregated around Harry, though he knew that it could not possibly be that many. He took his eyes off of Voldemort and looked around in wonder. Dumbledore's phoenix winged by. Ron's terrier came to sit by Harry's feet. Mr. Weasley's weasel, Kingsley's lynx, Tonk's wolf, and countless other animals of all shapes and sizes, emblems of hope and joy, came to stand stationary near Harry. Ginny's doe walked on delicate feet to stand so close to Harry that he could feel the warmth like a kiss. He leaned toward it, trying to get as close to her as he could, and finally looked back to his oldest enemy. Voldemort's eyes were wide, and his lip was curled in a sneer of hatred and rage. "So much for your terrible power," Voldemort spat. He seemed disconcerted by the sheer number, and Harry could hear renewed murmurings from the Death Eaters. They sounded anxious. Wormtail scrambled backward, away from the light. Harry said nothing. "Your friends will let you die alone," Voldemort said. He sounded almost giddy. "Some friends." "I'm not alone," Harry said. He thought of Merlin and the patron uses. His loved ones had his back, and he was the furthest thing from being alone. "And I'm lucky to have the type of friends that I do. I might have turned out like you, and then I really would have been alone. You're a waste of a man, Tom Riddle. But at least I'm alive," Voldemort hissed. Harry's legs felt very weak, but he kept his back straight and his head held high. Ginny's doe did not waver, but gave him the strength to do what he must. He wished that it was solid. He wished he could lean against it in truth. Avada Kedavra! And Harry's world went dark.
Thank you for always being with us, Potterheads. We've got a new chapter for you for Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. We are on Chapter 44, Sacrifice.
Chapter 44. Interlude, Severus Snape. Chapter text. Severus Snape was not a sentimental man. He did not have many friends, and the only one who had ever really counted was Lily Potter, and he had lost that friendship because of one word that he could never quite bring himself to repeat. But when Lily Potter's son handed him a silver rune, he had to admit, begrudgingly, of course, and with no small amount of resentment, that he had come to care for the boy after all. He wondered when he had stopped blaming Harry Potter for being the product of a union between the nemesis of his adolescence and the love of his life. He could not quite pinpoint the exact date. It might have been when Potter had saved his life in the graveyard, or possibly even before that. All he knew was that when Potter prepared to meet his death so that Voldemort could be vanquished, all resentment had slipped away and had been replaced with respect. And, he admitted to himself with a scowl, no small degree of fondness. He glanced at Sirius Black out of the corner of his eye. In his weaker moments, Severus wondered how he could have hated someone who was quite similar to himself. Possibly because the both of them held grudges longer and fiercer than most others Severus had met. In his more pessimistic moments, Severus blamed himself for allowing what could only be called friendship to develop between the two. Sirius Black, he thought bleakly. Got your knickers in a twist, Snivellus? Black asked. Severus hated the fact that he knew that Black only sparred with him to ease the ache at what was about to happen. He hated it even more that it helped. Once again, you show yourself to be completely incapable of depth beyond a centimeter, Severus said coldly. Black wagged a finger at him. You might watch your tone, Snivellus, he said. I might decide that I want to kill Wormtail. I called it, Severus interrupted smoothly. I have no problem with cheating, Black replied. I could always say those two little words before you can. I'm the quicker draw. In your dreams, Black, Severus countered. You're past your prime. Black scoffed. There's a bet I wouldn't lose. I've always been faster than you. I'll bet you wouldn't be able to do it, Severus lied, just to goad the other man. You'd take one look at the precious fourth marauder, and you'd go limp and dewy-eyed and think maybe Pettigrew deserves another chance. The goad did not penetrate Black's thick skin. This was made obvious by a great snort that erupted from Black. I could kill him in the blink of an eye, he said. Even quicker. I've fantasized about it for years. I've dreamed about it. But he eyed Severus. I suppose you have the better reason. Severus rolled his eyes. Other than that I called it. You were in love with her after all, Black said smugly. Though she didn't give you the time of day, good for her. I was only James' best mate. Were you really? Severus examined his nails. Some of us wondered if you weren't in love with him after all. Tell me. He dropped his voice conversationally. Did he always? Severus was slightly disgruntled at the fact that their conversation was halted by the opening of the doors that led to the great hall and the increasing clamor that made it quite difficult to hear. And I would have succeeded in offending him, he thought, annoyed. But he stood up to his full height and saw the familiar, untidy hair. He was not at all surprised that Potter had shown up, bloody noble git that he was. It's just so bloody unfair, he thought, before he could stop himself. I saw that, Black smirked. Saw what? That grimace, Black pointed out. I know what you were thinking. You were thinking that Harry Potter's the biggest bloody hero the world has ever seen, and you hate what's going to happen next. Severus paused for a very long time. Too long. He glared at Black for knowing that he could not deny this. Maybe I was just wishing that it was you, he finally said. It sounded weak even to his own ears. Black showed a mercy that was quite unnatural for him and did not mock him. Instead, they both turned to where Potter stood. He was pale like death. Me too, Black said. I couldn't, Severus admitted. He did not think that he had the capacity to love more than a very small handful of people. He glanced at Black out of the corner of his eye. He was not fully comfortable with this moment of honesty, but he may die this day as well. Voldemort was not going to be happy once he realized where Severus' loyalties lay, and he thought he might have run out of his lucky dodges. But still, he at least had a small chance, whereas Black's elbow connected with his ribs, and Severus realized with a jolt that the ringing in his ears was not, in fact, to do with his own thoughts about impending death. But Voldemort had arrived with an army. Severus had summoned him himself. Almost without thinking of it, he pulled up the sleeve of his robes. In the shadowy corner of the great hall, the runes seemed to cast light upon his dark mark. He looked up to find Black blatantly staring at it. Ugly, isn't it? he said casually. Black shrugged elaborately and then gazed in the direction of Potter. One man's shame is another man's badge of honor. For a moment, Severus was stunned to the words. He felt a great weight on his chest, and he had to concentrate very hard in order to take a breath. You must think you're about to die, Severus said. Indeed, Black looked like a man who had little to lose. He had that hardened, reckless look that would never have fit on the face of the insolent teenager he used to be. Haven't got anything better to do, he said flippantly. Severus felt much the same way. He did not think he would survive the revelation of his secret. Voldemort's revenge would, no doubt, be swift. He thought of Peter Pettigrew and the cowardice that changed the world, and he reckoned it worth it. He betrayed Lily, Severus thought. He had no doubt that Black thought of Potter, and that they were of one mind. It did not matter that it had been the better part of 2 decades since their deaths. What they would do in memory of Lily and James would be worth the cost. Excuse me, Black murmured. Severus watched him walk away and grip Potter in a fierce hug. Severus turned away and took a few steps in Dumbledore's direction. Dumbledore met him halfway. Severus was glad that he did not say a word. The older wizard obviously sensed that if he offered a platitude or an optimistic lie or a pithy saying, Severus would pull his wand on him. It made Severus deeply uncomfortable that one man had been fated to do this. If this is the universe's way of redressing a wrong, Severus said in a low, vicious voice. If this is the way it makes up for allowing Voldemort to exist. Dumbledore still said nothing. He did not appear to be waiting for Severus to finish his sentence. Instead, it was Voldemort's voice that came next. Voldemort, who told Harry to give himself up. Voldemort, who was planning to murder Lily's son. Voldemort, who had once been Severus' master. Severus felt a grim satisfaction that Voldemort still believed that Severus was his most loyal follower. He'd been waiting for this moment for years. He thought of the way Pettigrew would fall, and his fingers tightened on his wand. Severus and Dumbledore were like 2 small islands of silence in a raging sea of questions as Harry Potter and his wife and closest friends left the Great Hall and went into the entrance hall. He thought Potter might be giving his last goodbyes and did not want to intrude. Potter had only told a handful of people what he was about to do because Potter did not want to say goodbye to everyone. Severus respected that. What man would want to have a drawn-out deathbed scene that did not involve ill health, but a long walk to meet the wand of the wizard who had killed his parents? But still, Severus wished he could have said something to the boy, but he had no idea what that would have been. He suspected it would have been an apology. He and Dumbledore walked side by side through the throng of confused people. The Weasleys, minus Ron, crowded together and spoke together in low whispers. Percy stood a little way away from the rest of his family, and he looked as though he had been hit in the back of the head with a bludger. Severus thought he might suspect something of what was about to happen. The twins, holding identical broomsticks, were speaking in loud, frustrated voices. Severus entered the entrance hall at the exact moment Potter left, stepping out into the twilight and vanishing from sight. For a few moments, it was only those who knew. Granger's eyes were wide and filled with tears, and Weasley's face was screwed up as though he were protecting himself from very bright sunlight. Black stared at the ground, his eyes tightly closed, and Lovegood held Ginny Potter in a tight, fierce hug. She looked very small, and Severus was forcibly reminded of another redhead, beloved of Potter. "What's going on, Ron?" Charlie Weasley asked loudly, breaking the strange moment. "What's he doing?" "You heard him," Weasley said roughly. "He's unleashing his terrible power." "But are we still going to fight?" Fred asked, confused. "Will we even have to?" "Yes," Weasley said. He took several deep breaths. "Yes, of course we are. We need to. You've got to." With what appeared to take great effort, Weasley turned to look at those who had just joined them. "I want everyone in place. Right now. Now is the moment. While Voldemort is distracted." "But what is this terrible power?" Lupin asked. "I don't dash. It's love," said Dumbledore. "Love as deep and wide as the sea and just as fierce." "Harry is a Horcrux, Remus," Black said. "He has to die." "That's what he's doing right now," Weasley said. He had turned his back, and was now staring at the space between the castle and Voldemort and his followers. It appeared empty. Severus did not think that Potter would reveal himself until the very end. "No," Molly Weasley moaned. The rest of the Weasleys, Lupin, Tonks, and all the members of the Order of the Phoenix echoed her. Shock and the beginnings of grief etched on their faces. Severus could not look at them. He could only imagine how demoralizing it was for them. The one they had followed for so long was about to die, of his own free will, because of what Voldemort had done to him when he was a child. "Everyone in place," Weasley repeated. "But Dash, do as I said," Weasley shouted when no one moved. "He's doing this so the rest of us will survive, and we're going to bloody survive. Do you hear me? Fred, George, Charlie, Bill, get on your brooms. Everyone else, disillusionment charm. Now." "Ron," Lupin said. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the door. Severus watched as the Weasley brothers, minus Percy and Ron, mounted their brooms and vanished from sight. The others rippled into invisibility as well, until it appeared as though Severus, Weasley, Black, Granger, Ginny Potter, and Lupin were the only people inside the entrance hall. "What?" Weasley said impatiently. "He's all alone," Lupin said. "The Dementors. Can't we send our patron uses?" "He wouldn't. He hates them. I don't want him to die feeling the cold." Weasley was silent. "We don't want Voldemort, Dash." "Do it," Ginny Potter said fiercely. She had moved to just inside the doors. "We'll all do it. Every single one of us that can. Hell, it's the least we can do. He taught half of us how to do it." "You stay back," Weasley barked. "Don't even think about Dash. Don't try to protect me," Ginny said loudly. "I'm just as Dash." "Enough," Dumbledore said softly. "Now is not the time for a disagreement. Now the incantation is, I believe, expecto patronum." Whispers, murmurs, and loud voices filled the air as everyone took Dumbledore's lead. Severus paused for several moments, staring at Ginny Potter's Patronus. It was identical to his. Then he blinked, and it was gone, heading toward Harry to offer comfort in his last moments, to keep the chill of the Dementors away from him. Severus moved so he could see out, and the space between was filled with bounding, silvery animals that lit the sky with their glow. He could just barely see the figure of a tall man. There was a flash of green light, and the man fell. Severus felt a roaring in his ears, and the rune around his neck blazed with warmth. And without warning, without any sort of indication that anything of the sort would happen, he found himself in his office, or a place identical to it. But it seemed brighter, and little flecks of light danced in front of his eyes. He found himself staring down at a potion. A little drop jumped joyfully out of it. Felix Felicis. He looked up and met the eyes of Harry Potter. Severus suddenly realized that he was very angry. And underneath that anger was a hurt more profound than he wanted to admit. He tried to hide from it, to mask it with cynicism, but he could not. He turned and hid his face. "Thanks for loving my mom," Potter said. Severus did not think he had ever experienced anything quite like it. He blinked. Had he not just been standing in the entrance hall? Had he not just seen this man fall? He looked down and realized that the source of the light was the rune. "I'm sorry," Severus said. "I'm not," said Potter. And with as little warning, Severus was once again standing where he was supposed to be. He touched the rune and was surprised to find that it was not warm. It did not blaze with light. It was just a rune carved in silver. What the hell? Severus glanced around surreptitiously and found that he had obviously not been the only one to temporarily lose their grip on reality. Granger had her hand over her heart, gripping her rune fiercely. "The charm," she said, her voice wondering. The rune. Is that what? I think it." But she did not seem able to answer. Severus did not think he had ever seen her at a loss for words. He had wanted to put a silencing charm on her so often, it figured that she would stop her relentless flow of words just when he wanted an explanation. Severus scowled at her and hoped that Dumbledore would have an explanation. But Dumbledore apparently had no explanation either, or not one he was willing to share. He glanced over at Ginny Potter. Her eyes were closed, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She was smiling. No one spoke for several moments. Severus had to concede that he might never find out what the hell had just happened. Now, Weasley said, it sounded as though it hurt him to breathe. There was an air of shocked silence. Severus could feel them moving out. Several people brushed up against him. Gradually, the shock wore away to rage. Seamus Finnegan walked by him, swearing foully in response to the laughter and cheers from the Death Eaters and the roaring from the Giants. "He is dead," Pettigrew shouted so loudly that Severus was certain that he had used the sonorous charm. So Voldemort had had to use someone else to confirm the death of his enemy. This filled Severus with no small amount of satisfaction. Potter scared Voldemort even when he was dead. "That's our cue," Black said grimly. There was a gleam of rubies, and then Black's robes closed over Gryffindor's sword. "Try not to enjoy yourself too much." Severus bared his teeth at Black, drew his wand, and gripped the other man's upper arm tightly. He bumped into several invisible people as they exited, but they moved apart. Black swore loudly and fluently. He did not make any sense whatsoever. Together, they walked down the same path that Potter had taken. Black fought his grip and shouted obscenities. The Death Eaters watched them come. They had no idea. Voldemort had no idea. But Voldemort was occupied with other things. His wand was pointed at Potter's prone body. "Crucio!" he shouted gleefully. The body rose in the air once, twice, 3 times. Any last uncertainty fled. Potter's body had remained limp. No man could withstand that amount of pain without a twitch, without a scream. Severus forced his eyes away. "Those in the castle will be easily subdued," Severus lied coolly. "Just a few more lies. They were quite distraught by Potter's death. They allowed me to escape," he added. He shook Black roughly. Black was a traitor. He let them in. He pushed Black away from him roughly. He stumbled a little. "I would like your permission to kill him myself, my lord," he said deferentially. "You know I have long hated him." "Very well," Voldemort said. He seemed stunned by his own good fortune. His eyes kept returning to Potter's body as though he could not quite believe it. Severus allowed himself a brief glance at Nagini, Black's task, and felt an immense relief that in the next few moments, Voldemort would be mortal once more. Severus did not bother to draw in a deep breath. He did not hesitate. He pushed Black to the side and raised his wand. "Avada Kedavra!" he shouted. Wormtail fell to the ground in a tangle of limbs. His mouth was parted slightly, and his eyes were open and staring at the darkening sky. Severus felt a great sense of relief. The traitor was dead. Vengeance had been achieved. The man who had been too much of a coward to remain true to his friends would not say another word or take another breath. It was as though a large weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Voldemort stared at him, red eyes glinting with shock and the beginning of anger. "You killed Lily," Severus sneered. "And James," Black added. "And Harry," they said, almost at the same moment. Black drew the sword out of his robes with one graceful movement, and Voldemort did not have a chance to comprehend what was about to happen, let alone retaliate. The sword glinted and slashed, and Nagini was hacked nearly in 2. Black's face was alight and looked almost exactly as he had before he had gone to Azkaban. Voldemort's mouth fell open in shock, and a great many things happened at once. The Giants, who had been standing about, gave great roars of pain, and then the 3 of them exploded in a shower of sparks and bits of body. Severus could hear a Weasley laughing, and then the night was lit up not with gentle patron uses, but with curses and hexes. While Severus and Black had been a distraction, Weasley had ordered those who fought against Voldemort to surround them. Severus could not help it. He grinned. "Checkmate, asshole," he heard Weasley say over the din. The brief interlude ended when Voldemort's face twisted with rage. He raised his wand, ready to curse Severus to kill him. The air beside him rippled and distorted, and Albus Dumbledore became visible again. The Elder Wand was already in his hand, and he was already saying an incantation that lifted the body of Harry Potter gently into the air and moved it to a quieter spot out of the path of feet. "You will not desecrate his body again," he said quietly. There was a quality to his voice that reminded Severus of thunder. Severus shared a long glance with Black. Then he looked at the Death Eaters. Then he looked at the two greatest wizards of the age and decided that he did not want to miss this duel. He stepped 10 feet away from them, walked around them, casting protective charms that would ensure that no person or spell could penetrate it. And still they stared at each other. Dumbledore's long beard was as startlingly white as Voldemort's eyes were red. And at the very same moment, they began to circle each other.
Good day, Potterheads. Thank you for visiting the page. Here we are with a new chapter for Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. We are on Chapter 45, Interlude, Severus Snape.
Chapter 45, Always and Always. Chapter text. Harry opened his eyes. He was lying on a bed in a small, windowless room that was nevertheless filled with a warm light. He felt as though he had just woken up from a nap. The room felt familiar, as though he had spent a lot of time here, but he had never seen it before in his life. But it felt almost like home, in the way that Ron's room at the Burrow had been, or the boys' dormitory at Hogwarts. It wasn't quite home, but it was close enough. The fear and the pain had fled, though Harry felt a dull ache in his belly when he remembered what he had left behind. Ginny, Ron, Hermione, Luna, all the Weasleys, Sirius, Remus, and Tonks, Dumbledore, even Snape. The room seemed darker all of a sudden. Harry stood up, figuring that he might as well explore wherever he was, and as soon as he did, the sound of indistinct voices reached his ears. His heart leapt in his chest before he fully realized that he recognized one of them. Then, listening hard, he knew exactly who was waiting for him. He looked down at himself, grimacing when he realized that he was naked. Despite his impatience and his desire to see them, he found himself really hoping that dead people didn't walk around naked all the time. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, he noticed robes hanging off the bedpost. He grabbed them and pulled them on. Then he flung open the door and walked down the hall, feeling too many different emotions to process them all. Excitement warred with sadness. Curiosity warred with the desire to not be here just yet. And he was more than half afraid of meeting his parents for the first time in living memory. And he was thrilled beyond belief to see Neville again. They were obviously watching for him, for as soon as he caught sight of them, his mother was rushing toward him with her arms outstretched, and she nearly knocked him over with the force of her hug. "Oh, love," she wept. Harry patted her gently on the back. "My arms have been empty for so long." "Let him breathe, Lily," his father said gently. He disentangled them and had his turn for a hug. Harry looked over his shoulder to see Neville beaming at him. "Hey, Neville," said Harry. "Hey, Harry," said Neville. Tears stung Harry's eyes, but he didn't really care. He already missed Ginny and the others fiercely, but at least he wasn't alone. "I didn't know it would be like this." He laughed a little. "Maybe I wouldn't have been so afraid." "Listen, Harry," his mom said quietly. "Love is always and always. Our bodies may turn to dust, but love never ends. Therefore we never end. Death is nothing to fear, love." "I know that," Harry said. "I'm here, aren't I?" "You fear losing more people to death," Neville said. "But really, you haven't lost us forever. You're just going to have to say goodbye for a time." Harry was confused. "But I'm dead too, aren't I?" "Not really," his dad said. "But the Deathly Hallows." Harry let his voice trail away in confusion. How was it possible that he wasn't dead? He didn't have any of the Hallows, let alone all three. "The Deathly Hallows had nothing to do with your survival last time," said his mom. "It was my sacrifice that did it, Harry. He took your blood, and you're tied to life while he lives." Harry felt the disorientation that involved being confronted a stolen memory, and he growled. "It was Merlin who did this, wasn't it?" he said. "It wasn't a question. He made me think I was going to die, didn't he?" Harry's eyebrows slammed together. "I thought I was going to die for years. That was really fucked up of him." At this very moment, everyone you love is now immune to death from Voldemort's wand, his dad said. "You meant to die for them. You did the same thing for them that your mother did for you. If you had known that you would survive, they would not have had that protection." It clicked into place. Dumbledore had always claimed that with magic, intent was most important. It enhanced the strength of spells. It allowed people to do things that they might not have otherwise. Even Bellatrix Lestrange had claimed long ago in another lifetime that he had to mean it. She'd been speaking of the unforgivables, but it fit here as well. While he still felt a lingering annoyance, his brief flare of rage at the torment Merlin had put him through was dampened by the fact that his loved ones were safe. He felt a churn of guilt when he met Neville's eyes. "Neville Dash, don't you dare!" "Harry," Neville said sharply. "My death was not your fault. There was nothing you could have done, and I meant it when I said that I have no regrets." "Harry, my parents are here, too." Harry searched his open, honest face. Neville had never been able to lie worth a damn, but the only thing Harry saw was peace. "I'm still going to miss you," said Harry. "All three of you. I'm going to wish you were there with me. But don't you dare keep blaming yourself for why we aren't," his dad commanded. "I wanted to tell you that for so many years, son. But if I hadn't been Dash—" "Stop," his mom said firmly. "You were just a baby. My baby. Voldemort is to blame for the losses you've suffered, and it's time you stop feeling guilty for being the only person who could defeat him. You just need to realize that people love you as much as you love them," Neville said. "And yeah, I might not have died if we hadn't been friends, but I don't regret a single moment. It was worth it." Harry closed his eyes, his mind whirling. How many times had he thought that very thing in the last few days? It was worth it. They were worth it. He had never really considered that people might still consider protecting him with their own bodies worth it, even after they were dead. It was a very humbling feeling, and the guilt he carried that never really went away began to recede. "Your time is almost up," said his mom. "Unless you don't want to stay here, do you?" Harry immediately thought of Ginny. "I'm sorry, but Dash." "Don't apologize," said his dad. "We want you to live your life. I want 3 grandchildren." His mom leaned over and stroked his hair. The smile she gave him was a bit watery. "Minimum." Harry had to swallow several times before the lump in his throat disappeared and he could speak again. "I'm sure Ginny and I could arrange something like that." All 4 of them stood up in the same moment. Harry knew that he would miss them. He'd look for them at his wedding, at the births of his children, at all his life's milestones. But they wouldn't be there. They'd be here, though, waiting for him to return after a long life. And the thought filled him with peace. "Harry, we're so proud of you," his dad said earnestly. "Having you for a son is really quite an honor. You're the bravest man I've ever met." "Thanks, Dad," Harry said in a hoarse voice. He alternated staring at both of them. He wanted to memorize their features and the sound of their voices, and the way his mother kept hooking her hair behind her ears, and the way his father ruffled his hair every few minutes. "And Mum, you both saved my life at the expense of your own, and it was a precious gift." He hugged his mother, and his father put his arms around the both of them. They stood like that for a long moment, and Harry thought it had been worth getting hit by the killing curse just to see them like this and to feel them next to him for the first time that he could remember. "I want you to tell Sirius something," his dad said suddenly. "Oh, James," Lily rolled her eyes. "He lost the bet." "Lily," James said firmly, "tell Sirius that just because I'm dead doesn't mean that he's gotten out of honoring our bet. His first child is to be named Elvendork." "Elvendork?" Harry repeated, astonished. "It's unisex," James winked. Harry laughed while his mother muttered something that sounded very much like marauders. His father beamed at him, pulled his mother to him with one arm, and kissed the top of her head. Harry turned to Neville, wanting the last image of his parents to be just that. Harry reached out his hand to shake Neville's, and then pulled him into a backslapping hug. "Live happily, Harry," Neville said simply. "We're all going to miss you very much," Harry said. Neville smiled. "And I'll be anticipating all of you. It's only goodbye for a little while." White mist surrounded Harry, and soon Neville's face was indistinct. He heard his dad's muffled voice one final time. "We love you, son. Remember Elvendork." And then they were gone. HP. The first thing that Harry felt upon his return to life was the ground underneath his back and the shape of his wand against his chest. His ears rang with the shouts of laughter of the Death Eaters. Distantly, he could hear others screaming and thought it might be those that fought against Voldemort. Tom Riddle struggled to his feet. Apparently, he had fallen as Harry had. "Don't try to talk," said Merlin immediately. They wouldn't hear you, but they'd see your lips move. Harry, who still felt slightly resentful that whoever Merlin was had so blithely toyed with his life, wanted to assure him that Harry was not quite as stupid as the other wizard apparently thought. He'd had no intention of opening his mouth, or indeed opening his eyes. "Is he dead?" Voldemort asked. "Check to see, Wormtail." "Imperio," whispered Merlin. Harry's eyes involuntarily fluttered behind his closed lids. Wormtail's steps faltered just a moment before he plodded onward. Harry felt grim satisfaction that Wormtail had seemed fearful just moments before. And Tom Riddle. He was afraid of Harry, even though he had just taken the killing curse without defending himself, which, he thought begrudgingly, had likely saved his life. He still thought a bit dodgy that Merlin had played him so well. Not to mention that he'd fooled Dumbledore. Harry had to admit that this did not concern him overmuch. In fact, he was slightly impressed. Questions battered his mind, and he did not allow a small inconvenience like Wormtail ascertaining whether or not Harry Potter drew breath distract him. But try as he might, he could make no sense of Merlin's presence. He had obviously stolen Harry's memories years ago. He briefly thought Merlin might be Lockhart, and had to hold back a snore of laughter. Why would he be there tonight? Or was it as he had said? He'd simply not wanted Harry to be alone at the end. If that was the case, Harry appreciated the sentiment behind it. But it seemed risky, hopping through time, just to keep a man company in the moments before he didn't die. He hid a grimace when Wormtail pried back an eyelid. "He is dead," shouted Wormtail. He scuttled back toward his master. The air around Harry's face moved. Merlin had bent over him. "I can't take the pain away," he said. This apparently distressed him. He sounded fretful. "But I can hold you immobile. You won't be able to scream. You won't have to hold it in. You can scream all you want, and your body won't betray you. Is this all right?" The Cruciatus Curse, Harry thought grimly. Of course Voldemort would want to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had bested Harry. Had he been given a chance to think about it, he would have come to this conclusion himself. "Yes," Harry breathed. A moment later, his bones became slack and useless, and he briefly wondered if Merlin actually was Lockhart and had removed all the bones from his body. But he got the impression, from the fact that he had broken into Gringotts, the Department of Mysteries, and successfully traveled through time without blowing up the world, that Merlin was not quite that incompetent. The pain hit a moment later. Every nerve in Harry's body was hit with wave after wave of agony. He tried to open his mouth to scream, but he could not feel his lips or his tongue. All he could feel was pain. His body was thrown up in the air once, twice, 3 times, and Harry feared that the agony would cause him to vomit, and then he would choke. There was a light brush on the top of his head, and Harry focused on what must have been Merlin's hand, offering comfort, the only thing that he could feel that wasn't making him scream his lungs out inside his head. "It's all right," Merlin murmured. "It's almost over. Just a few more moments. And then that fucker will be dead in less than an hour." "That fucker," he added viciously. Harry focused on that voice. He could hear it through the pain. And then the pain ended, as if a switch had been thrown. Harry panted for breath, or he would have done had his body been obeying his commands. The big muscles in his legs twitched. It was really driven home to Harry in that moment. The Cruciatus Curse was unforgivable for a reason. That did not, however, mean that Harry did not desire to use it on Voldemort and Wormtail, the last real enemies of his left alive. Merlin did not appear to be in any hurry to lift the spell that left Harry's body slack. 2 sets of purposeful footsteps. Harry could hear serious swearing under his breath. "Those in the castle will be easily subdued," said Snape. "They were quite distraught by Potter's death. They allowed me to escape." There was a thump and a muffled groan. "Allow me to kill him myself, my lord. You know I have long hated him." Despite the lingering aches from the pain and the slightly soporific effect it had had on him, Harry was ready to jump up and begin dueling Voldemort right at this moment. Sirius and Snape had walked into the den of snakes, and it was more agonizing than the Cruciatus Curse to not act. "Avada Kedavra!" Snape shouted, and Harry knew without having to look that the body that had fallen to the ground was not Sirius, but Wormtail's. The long-ago betrayal had finally been avenged. "You killed Lily," said Snape. "And James," said Sirius. "And Harry," they both said together. Harry tried to fight against the spell, for he did not see how either of them could survive this. His return from the dead would distract Voldemort long enough, and then they would duel. But he remained prone, even as all hell broke loose. Voldemort screamed with rage. The earth shook beneath Harry's body, and explosions rocked the world. "Checkmate, asshole!" Ron shouted. Harry lay on his back like an absurd turtle, unable to move. He hated this, but the spell held him captive. And then, "You will not desecrate his body again," said Dumbledore. His voice was low and even, but Harry could hear the danger in it. And as his body was lifted into the air, gently and surely, he savagely hoped that Dumbledore would tear Voldemort to pieces. Harry found himself floating away from the scene of the battle. Dumbledore's quiet words filled him with warmth, even as he longed to reveal that he was alive. The night was alive with the sound of fighting, screaming, and exploding giants, and he knew that those he loved must be feeling a terrible sort of despair. He'd heard it in Ron's voice when he had shouted, and it did not seem fair that he kept the fact of his own survival to himself. But Merlin had not yet released him from the spell. Harry privately thanked Dumbledore for putting him in a position that the field of battle was clear in his vision. He was far away enough to be safe in opening his eyes. He greedily searched the crowd of battling bodies for those he loved. His heart leapt whenever he saw a head of flaming hair. Ron was brilliant. Harry had not fully appreciated how talented of a wizard his best mate had become. But when Ron moved his wand, Death Eaters fell and did not get up. Hermione led a section of Muggleborns in driving the Dementors back to the forest. The patron uses, which had seemed so benign while Harry had been waiting for the curse, looked like wild animals as they harried the chill, dark-robed creatures. And Ginny was like a blazing light in a sea of darkness. She and Luna stood back to back, and both of them danced and wove and ducked around flashes of light. Harry could not take his eyes off her, and his heart pounded inside his chest as he watched her cut a swath through the Death Eaters. The Weasley twins were death from the sky, and once the giants had fallen, they focused on the flank of Voldemort's army. Their beating skills served them well as they attacked. Harry did not once see them miss and hit someone fighting for the right side. It took only a few minutes of watching for Harry to realize that Ron had planned well, utilized the strengths of those under his command, and that the larger army, Voldemort's, were going to be routed. He focused his attention, instead, on the battle between the two most powerful wizards in Britain, perhaps even in the Western Hemisphere. It was a thing of beauty and terror, and Harry's heart nearly failed in his chest time and again. Dumbledore had the Elder Wand, but Voldemort was cold and ruthless, and Harry was hard-pressed to predict who would win this duel. Lightning flashed from the Elder Wand, and even over the sound of battle, Harry could hear Voldemort's scream of pain. He countered it with impenetrable darkness that covered the ground where they dueled. Whatever had come with the darkness caused a roar of fury that Harry had never before heard from Dumbledore. Merlin said something. Harry realized with some surprise that he could move his lips again. "What?" he said. At just that moment, Dumbledore slashed open Voldemort's leg. Blood sprayed out, and Harry could see it, so fierce was the light of battle. "I understand what always and always means now," replied Merlin. I really understand it. I keep finding that always and always means a hell of a lot more than I thought," Harry said vaguely. The desire to fight was keen and growing ever stronger, even as more and more of Voldemort's followers fell. People were already stopping. A small crowd huddled in a circle around the duel. Sirius and Snape were among them. "Let me up," said Harry. Merlin sighed. "I have to, don't I?" he said. "I bloody hate fate, you know." Harry let out a bark of laughter. "You're telling me this? I've had a prophecy hanging over my head since before I was born. My parents were murdered because of it. I don't think there's anything in the world that I hate more." "Me either," said Merlin. Now, Harry gritted his teeth. "Wheel me up? I want to help them." Merlin did not say anything more, but moments later, the muscles in Harry's body, not just his face, began to respond to his commands again. His entire body tingled, as though it had been asleep, and his skin prickled. Harry lay there for a moment, relishing the feeling of his lungs contracting and his heart beating. It hit him again that once this night was over, the rest of his life stretched out before him. "Excuse me while I go kill an evil bastard," said Harry. But before he could stand up, something soft and silky landed on his chest. The invisibility cloak returned to him at last. Harry stood and threw it over himself with one fluid motion, and seconds later was sprinting down the hill to where Dumbledore and Voldemort, two giants, one light and one dark, engaged in battle. They moved so quickly that Harry's eyes could barely track it. The earth beneath their feet was parched, and little pockets of flame burned within a protective circle. Giant hands made of dirt had wrapped themselves around Voldemort's ankles, and he fought to free himself even as he sent another curse at Dumbledore. The crowd gathered around the fighters had grown, and Harry realized with a start that the battle was essentially over. Death Eaters were scuttling away, and Voldemort was the only one left still fighting. And fight he did. Harry came close to some Muggleborns when Dumbledore gave a cry of pain that burbled on the end. His heart leapt in his chest, and he drew in a deep breath with the rest of the crowd. He pushed his way through the ring, hoping that Dumbledore was not. "Incarcerus!" Dumbledore shouted. Not for the first time, Harry cursed the fact that it was far too dangerous for Dumbledore to use the Elder Wand to kill. Violence begot violence, but Harry suddenly wished for a quick death, little though he deserved it, for Voldemort. Obviously flagging, Remus said in a low, urgent voice, "Take down the protective circle, Severus. We can all go help him." Snape began, but Harry interrupted him. "Allow me," he said, and pulled at his cloak. For several moments, the two older men could only stare, and without saying a word, Snape lifted his wand and let the wards come crashing down. Harry did not waste a moment, but shouted Sectum Sempra, and a long gash that dripped with blood appeared on the same arm that Harry had injured before. He shouted again, but this time Voldemort deflected it. A shield charm spread like a poisonous mushroom between the two of them. For almost an entire minute, Harry was the only one capable of movement and speech. Voldemort listed heavily to the side, and even Dumbledore's arm fell slack. Harry took advantage of the moment to find Ginny. She stood with Ron and Hermione, and her beautiful face was alight with joy. As soon as Voldemort was taken care of, Harry vowed to whisk her away and celebrate the wonder of having a lifetime of freedom to enjoy each other. "You're dead," Voldemort said. Harry made a show of surprise. "I must be an extra concentrated ghost, then," he said flippantly. "But I'm fairly certain that I'm still alive." Harry lazily flicked his wand, and a yawning pit opened up beneath Voldemort's feet. Now that it was the moment, Harry felt all his lingering trepidation slip away. All of the Horcruxes had been destroyed, and Voldemort was just a man who shouted and twisted and fought to scramble to his feet. "You're a very stupid man, Tom," Harry said. The shield had dissipated, and creeping vines erupted from Harry's wand and wrapped around Voldemort's scrambling feet. A small part of Harry knew that it was dangerous to play with the other wizard, but the majority of him enjoyed it far too much to stop now. "Do you want to know why? Your short-sightedness has cost you everything. We've tricked you every step of the way, and you've fallen into our hands just when we wanted you." "Lies!" Voldemort shouted. "You're already dead," Harry told him. "You can't kill me," he hissed. "I've taken steps, Dash." "Oh, you mean that you've created Horcruxes?" Harry asked. He was delighted to see the panic that flared in Voldemort's eyes. "All of them have been destroyed. The cup, the locket, the snake, the diary, the diadem, the ring. They're all gone." Voldemort's fury exploded, and the night was suddenly alive with shapes made of destructive fire. Dragons and chimeras and serpents raced to destroy all in its path. For one frozen moment, Harry was transported to his first lifetime, and he was powerless. "And oh," he shouted. He and Dumbledore and Ron and Ginny were the first to react, and Harry fought a battle with a flaming serpent. Sweat rolled down his face as he forced it into submission. The sky around him was like an inferno, and people were screaming, and just as suddenly they were gone. Voldemort stood on shaking legs, and it suddenly struck Harry that he was an old man. A twisted old man that was very much mortal. "Nice try," Harry said. "Sectum sempra," he said again. Voldemort screamed and fell to one knee as blood gushed from his right leg. He staggered to his feet again. His face was twisted with fury and denial. Harry did not hesitate, but encased his enemy's feet in the ground. The spell held, though Voldemort fought it. He roared with animalistic rage. "Love will always, always conquer," said Harry. "The last enemy that shall be defeated is death," he quoted. "Even when someone's last breath is drawn, love goes on forever. For always and always. You're a fool. You spent so much time trying to conquer death that you didn't realize that the one force in the entire world that can is the one thing that you shunned." Voldemort jeered. "You are so like Dumbledore," he said scathingly. He abandoned his attempt to free himself. They stood, for a moment, just pointing their brother wands at each other. "Love is pathetic. It's for the weak. It's for always and always," Harry said. "But you'll never be able to understand that." "Oh, I understand," Voldemort said. His face contorted into something like a smile, had that face still been human enough to smile. And before Harry could move, he'd shouted a word, and a sickly purple light came toward Harry. But it disappeared before it could strike, and then Voldemort had twisted his body and raised his wand toward Ginny, and the green light of the killing curse struck her right on the breast. Harry caught her before she fell. He did not even spare a glance to watch Voldemort struck with his own rebounding curse. He barely heard the body fall to the ground. He did not listen to the screams and shouts of those who did not realize that Ginny could not possibly be dead, because if there was anyone present that Harry's love would protect from death, it would be her. He meant to die for everyone there, but he'd come back for her. "Wake up, Ginny," he said softly. He cradled her in his arms. She drew in a deep breath, and her eyelashes fluttered open. He did not give her a chance to speak, but pressed his lips against hers in a kiss that was 1 part desperation and 3 parts joy. She returned his kiss with great fervor, and when they finally pulled away, Harry felt an intense burning inside his chest that was painful and wonderful all at once. Ron was the first to react. With a cry that sounded like a mixture of a shout and a sob, he wrapped his arms around them both, and for one glorious moment, it was just the 3 of them. They had lost so much, given everything they had, and a miracle had happened. Tears ran unabashedly down Ron's face. And then Hermione was there, and then Sirius, who lifted Harry off his feet and deafened him with laughter that sounded rich and unfettered. It was when he and Ginny were separated, her mother and father had pulled her away and into their arms after shaking Harry's hand, that Harry noticed something odd. Emotions swirled and rolled around him, and he halted midway through a shouted conversation with Tonks when he realized that he felt Ginny's elation that Harry, was alive. "What's wrong?" said Tonks. "Nothing," said Harry. His eyes found Ginny's. They were round with shock. "Everything is perfect. I can't believe it." He laughed. He felt so giddy that he wondered if he had gone mad, and he didn't much care. He felt another surge of joy that was not his own, and, abandoning Remus and Tonks in mid-congratulations, Harry made his way back to her. "Is that you?" they asked in unison. "I think so," Ginny said. She laid a hand on his breast. Harry started when she winced when he did the same. "You're hurt," he said. "Not really," she shrugged. Then she gave him a lopsided smile. "Oh, but I've got a scar to match yours. Can we go find out?" Harry grinned at her. He glanced around. Already, Kingsley was organizing people to take the fallen Death Eaters to the Ministry of Magic. Others huddled in groups, looking stunned and happy. Harry knew that he ought not to abandon everyone. He was certain that Ron and Hermione would need an explanation. They deserved one. But he and Ginny had both just survived the killing curse, and Harry thought they were entitled to a little alone time. She evidently felt the same, as she did not even put up a token resistance when he started to pull her away toward the castle. The room of requirement awaited them. Luna sat halfway up the hill. Her face was hidden in the shadows, but Harry would know that cloud of blonde hair anywhere. Harry stopped short when he saw her, suddenly remembering Merlin. He did not know what Merlin had changed. He would probably never know, and he was all right with that for the moment. though he suspected that his curiosity would come back fully when he had had a chance to process everything. But for now, will you tell Merlin I said thank you for whatever he did? Harry asked. If you see him, you're welcome, said Merlin. Luna didn't say anything. And thanks for giving me back my cloak, said Harry. There was an awkward moment while Harry teetered on the edge of begging for answers. But Ginny's impatience to be alone fired up his own impatience, and Harry resisted the urge to use magic to force Merlin to give up his secrets. It was the least he could do. And then they were walking very quickly, almost running, and Ginny burbled with laughter as they headed up the stairs. Harry practically dragged her behind him. His legs were far longer than hers, and whenever the moving staircases held them in one place, he kissed her with the passion that was rising swiftly inside them both. The door had barely shut before Harry had his wand out and had exposed her left breast. A cut in the shape of a lightning bolt bled freely, and he winced. I barely feel it, Ginny said almost shyly. Even a little pain is too much, Harry said. He narrowed his eyes in concentration and began to siphon the blood away. I want to keep the scar, Ginny said. Harry looked up swiftly and saw that tears poured down her cheeks. What's this? He asked. I'm just. Ginny shrugged one shoulder. What happened? And Harry told her everything. His conversations with Merlin, his experience with his parents, everything. She listened as he slowly healed her cut, leaving a scar that matched his own. Normally, he would not like her flesh being marred in such a way, but he had to admit that it seemed fitting. He sat back on his heels, and the chair she was sitting on transformed into a bed. Was that you or me? Ginny asked slyly. Both of us, I think, Harry said. He crawled up beside her as she lay back. What better way to celebrate our mutual survival of the killing curse? She grinned. Then her smile faded into something more contemplative, and she laced her fingers with his. The moment you died, I had a sort of vision of you, she admitted. Harry gaped at her, and she continued. We were making love, and you told me that even though you were gone, a little part of you would always be making love to a little part of me. Harry fell back. I've never heard of anything like that before, he said. I think it's partly why I can feel you now, she said, and why you can feel me. I don't know, we'll have to ask Dumbledore, but it makes sense. And then when the curse hit me, I saw you again, and you gave me that cheeky grin and said you had work to do, and I felt this wonderful warmth all over my body. It was like you were within me. Harry leaned over and kissed her because he didn't know quite what to say. How did one respond to visions one's wife had about oneself? I want to be within you right now. Harry moved on top of her and whispered in her ear. She chuckled against his lips. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Let's not tell everyone that we had Merlin in our grasp again and did nothing about it.